On this episode of Make It, we're joining New York-based photographer Lissa Rivera. In her series, Beautiful Boy, Lissa uses vintage aesthetics to challenge modern perceptions of gender identity on this episode of Make It. Hi, Lissa. How are you doing?
Hi, good. How are you?
Good. Thanks a lot for coming on the show. I'm really excited to have you.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So for those of you that may not be familiar with you, could you tell me a little bit about yourself, what kind of a photographer you are, what kind of art that you practice?
So I have been taking pictures of my domestic partner for several years. We started out as friends, but then we became more than that through falling in love, doing the work. And we explore identity in relationship to the history of photography. And we pretty much just go on adventures based off of what we're looking at the time. We just explore it in a very organic way.
Yeah, that's awesome. You had explained to me at one point that your partner, BJ, is also like an art historian and looks into art and history. How has that impacted your exploration of identity through photography?
Well, he doesn't get bored with helping me out. He's always very welcoming and always very patient. And it helps that he is looking at history from a different point of view. Perhaps if he was an artist, he wouldn't have the patience to sit for hundreds of photos like he does. But it's a way to experience other time periods as well.
Right. And I think that's really interesting. I mean, we have a bunch of your photos. I think you were saying, like, these are some of the photos that you started off with in the beginning of your relationship?
Yeah, that's the first photo I took of BJ. And we actually felt like a very strong connection because I had never had anyone be so vulnerable and emotionally open. And it really meant a lot to take a photo of BJ to show them as how they wanted to look and show them that they were beautiful because he hadn't really seen a lot of pictures of himself the way he wanted to look. So I did a test shot of myself, and you could see they're not really good photos, and it's just a wrinkled up fabric and some things I had lying around, but it was more important to get started than to make this perfect thing happen. And it was more personal and not really meant to show anyone. Mm-hmm. And it was really meaningful. BJ even made me this locket where he drew a picture of the first photos that we took really as a memento. And then I just tried all different types of photographic styles at first. I didn't know what we would end up doing. I did almost screen tests of BJ from different angles,
this photo
fabrics, yeah.
I mean, this is one of the first photos on your website that really stood out to me. Like this picture, just the vulnerability, the kind of, I felt like I was there. I felt like I was actually present in this moment, and it felt really connected in a really wonderful way, but also just this closeness that you have with BJ.
Yeah, it was really an amazing experience for me to have the opportunity to look at someone and have them allow me to look at them and look at them in a way where I could see their beauty through my own eyes. I feel like not everyone is able to open themselves up that way, to have someone else look at them and present them through their own eyes. And it was just kind of an addicting feeling, and I just felt really connected and grateful.
Yeah, that's great. And I think one of the things that's really interesting about your work is your approach to identity and how you can explore how photographers have had an impact into how identity is portrayed for individuals throughout history. And that idea of taking advantage of a lot of the standards and expected norms of what identity and gender identity are, and in some ways flipping that on its head, and in some ways just trying to challenge some of those points is really interesting. How did you decide to go down that pathway, or what was it BJ that inspired you to go down this route, or is this something that's been important to you before you even met BJ?
It was something that was important to me, and so BJ had confessed to me that they had been wearing dresses privately for quite some time but didn't know what it meant. And I kind of shared with them that I felt really not always at home, and the expectations that were put on me to be feminine in a certain way. And I felt so much of identity has to do with looking at pictures and looking at films and videos online, and what you desire to be could change based off of what you see in a day, changing from day to day, and also changing on the people around you and trying to connect to them and trying to have them react to you in a positive way. So I found that identity wasn't ever really stable, and that instead of struggling to find one way to be, you could feel at home with the fact that there's never one way to be, because it's so dependent on these other things, especially images, because I think humans have a natural ability to want to adapt to the dominant images that are being presented in culture.
Yeah. What do you feel like is like photography's role in identifying or portraying that identity? And like you said, a lot of people look at photography, look at photos, and in some ways pattern themselves off of that. How do you feel about photographers' role then and portraying that norm?
I feel like it's important for everyone to understand that photography is a visual language. It's a tool just like learning how to write or learning how to read. You understand that someone who is, let's say, writing an article has a perspective based off of their history. And the way that you photograph someone also is very reliant on your own personal history and the personal history of the person that's reacting to you. And in the project Beautiful Boy, BJ transforms all the time. He looks different every time I photograph him. Here he's in my bathing suit, and it looks so different on him than it would on me. And here BJ's dressed up as a male impersonator, so looking at history. And this is a great image because it shows that in a mirror that there's a distorted glass, and one side of BJ's face is much different than the other. And the thing is that human beings are always trying to understand what they look like, but we can only see ourselves through different lenses and different mirrors that are never quite like looking through the eyes of someone else. And I think that through social media and like say Instagram or Facebook, which I think is what most people are using now, people are trying to figure out how they fit into the world and how they present themselves. So these techniques that I use, kind of looking back at the history of photography, they could be used by anyone, really. We didn't have very much going into this. I was just using like discount fabrics, one window in my kitchen. We had to take out all the furniture from the kitchen and then bring it all back after we were done. So it was more about, I didn't wait until I had like everything in order. I didn't even have an updated version of Photoshop.
That's fine.
But we just kind of like used these images. We ended up putting them out in the world after we had done a lot of personal work for ourselves. And then after we put them out in the world and saw that there was a need for images like this, then we started to kind of go on like more adventures together, starting out like reclaiming spaces that were part of BJ's biography. So this is an old house in Connecticut near where BJ went to school. And then this is BJ's parents were away on vacation, so we reclaimed the house. We took all the furniture out of the living room and took this image. This is in his sister's bathroom. And then the limitations of shooting in the kitchen became too much for me. So we started going on adventures based off of, it's usually a collage of a lot of different images that inspire me. Like it could range from the images from the 30s to the 70s all in one image.
So over the time process or over your series with BJ, you started off in your kitchen, natural light, obviously. How has your technique or how has your process for capturing these photos changed? Are you still using natural light? Are you lighting things on location? What's the process that you go through right now for capturing your photos?
I still use natural light. I have a good tripod and a shutter release because the exposures can be quite long, and I tend to take a lot of images. And BJ's position tends to be in relationship to where the light's coming from, so it has a painterly effect. One thing that's really important to me is to have a very good lens. I think that even more expensive cameras, if you don't have a great lens, it doesn't matter how many megapixels that they have. And like, to be economical, I just rent my lenses. So I don't have to ever worry about like the credit card, or taking out a credit card, or having something that's really unobtainable. Everything that we do is very affordable.
That's great. Yeah, that's a really good approach to it. No, I really appreciate you coming in, sharing your work with me, sharing your approach, your process, your muse, BJ. They seem wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
And I really love the stuff that you're doing. I can't wait to keep on seeing more and how you continue your project.
Thanks, that's really nice of you. Thanks. I appreciated the conversation.
Sure, thanks for stopping by. And thanks everybody for stopping by on this episode of Make It. Join us again on the next show.